The next session speaker is Jordan McClinton. Jordan is a student at the Bible Seminary in his final semester. He's writing his master's thesis on this topic that he's presenting today. Jordan is working with us at Shiloh and at Mount Ebal and will be a square supervisor in our project this winter. We're actually planning a winter project at Shiloh, the Lord willing, and the temperature cooperates. And Jordan's topic is a reexamination of late bronze pottery at Shiloh.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you guys for being here this morning. So as Scott said, we're going to talk about late bronze pottery at the biblical site of Shiloh. Just a quick introduction. Scott did a great job. My name is Jordan McClinton. I am a current graduate student at the Bible Seminary, soon to be graduating with a biblical history and archaeology degree. I'm also a square supervisor at Shiloh, specifically focusing on the area that we're going to talk about today. Just a few quick acknowledgments this morning. I certainly want to thank and acknowledge my incredible professors, Dr. Scott Stripling, Dr. Lynn Lewis, who's here today, as well as Dr. Doug Petrovich, and all of all the amazing staff and faculty at the Bible Seminary, as well as all of my Shiloh Dig staff, some of whom are here today, volunteers who have made this work possible. NEAS, I want to thank you guys. This is actually my first NEAS to attend, and they so graciously allowed me to present here. And then I want to give an unlisted acknowledgement. A lot of my focus today is on the work of Israel Finkelstein, and I just wanted to acknowledge his work. A lot of this is going to be in contrast to some of what he talks about, but I just wanted to acknowledge the great work that he has done through the many years of publications and excavations that he has done. So again, the thesis of this presentation is a reevaluation and a reanalysis of the previously excavated late bronze material from Shiloh, specifically found in Area D. And so for those of you who have not heard of Shiloh or know some of the excavation work that has been done there, just to give a quick, brief history of excavations at Shiloh. It started in 1922 with the Danish excavation team there. They did initial probes there at Shiloh, as well as a survey of the area, which led to the initial 3 seasons led by Hans Kjær in 1926, 1929, and 1932. And it unfortunately ended as Kjær contracted dysentery, was taken to Jerusalem and passed away, which ended the initial Danish excavation, which 30 years later, Sven Holm Nielsen and team took up the torch and completed his final season at Shiloh, closed everything out, and then finished his publications, which you can read today. Which, about 20 years after that, Bar Ilan University, led by Israel Finkelstein, excavated from 1981 to 1984 in multiple areas on the Tell, including Area D, which you can see here in the photo, which again is the area that we're going to focus on today. In addition to Bar Ilan, there were multiple salvage excavations that took place at Shiloh from the Israeli Antiquities Authority and Kamat, including the Summit Project, the southern and western areas of the Tell, which leads us to our current excavation work by the Associates for Biblical Research, which started in 2017, led by Scott Stripling. ABR is currently gearing up for its 4th season this winter, as Scott mentioned. Lord willing, in the next few weeks, we're planning to get on a plane and finally fly back to Israel and do some excavation work, followed shortly by season 5 this summer. So our current ABR Dig, currently we've identified strata from the Middle Bronze II all the way through the Islamic period. And ABR has identified the first late bronze in context stratum. We're going to talk a lot today about late bronze pottery. The majority of the pottery that has been found up to this point by previous excavations have been out of context, which we'll talk a little bit about here in a few minutes. But ABR has found the first LB stratum in context, which has identified around 175 late bronze pottery sherds, which have yet to be broken down into subcategory distinctions. I want to give you a quick overview of the site. So this is our current excavation field, which includes our current site. So this is ABR's area H1, which is where ABR has been working for the past 3 seasons, excavating there. In the next few seasons, the plan is to push a little further south. So you're looking north in the tell, east, west, so pushing down south or up the tell a bit, or into Area K, as we're uncovering a monumental building that most likely expands into Area K. Area K was a previously excavated area by Israel Finkelstein. And the area that we're focusing on today is Area D. As I mentioned, this is one of the areas that was excavated in the 1980s by Israel Finkelstein here on the northeastern portion of the tell. Here's a little bit of a blown up shot of the site there. Area D is located on a broad terrace on the northeastern perimeter of the tell. It was originally opened up to identify and to investigate the Middle Bronze fortification wall, that you can see right here. I'll give you a little bit better of a shot. So again, going back to this overall, you can see this Middle Bronze fortification wall going all the way around the tell here, and here's what we're looking at here. You can get a little bit better of a shot from one of the original photos. You can see this sectioned trench that Finkelstein used or cut into the glacis, there on the outside of the wall, showing the Middle Bronze fortification wall there. The upper terrace consisted of roughly 375 square meters of 10 excavated squares, which you can see right there. Finkelstein identified this upper terrace, a portion of it at least, as a late bronze debris dump, debris 407, which consisted of thousands of late bronze pottery sherds, bones, ash, that Finkelstein concluded was consistent with a favisa, or a dump that was associated with occultic practice. Area D yielded 2,621 late bronze pottery sherds, 192 of which were included in his final excavation report. And the additional finds that were found were all consistent with the late bronze period, which were 104 repairable whole vessels, approximately 3,000 bones, numerous cultic objects, and then in addition to the late bronze, there were Iron Age silos that were cut into the late bronze material. And one could argue that this material was cleared off or was deposited here in a latter period, which was actually Finkelstein's assessment. But the presence of these Iron Age silos being cut into this late bronze material lends itself to the fact that this late bronze material must have been there first. Our assessment, ABR's assessment, is that the favisa was actually formed in the late bronze period, opposed to a latter period clearing out the material since the presence of these Iron Age silos were there. Finkelstein's position was, when the Israelites arrived in the Iron Age, they scraped off the summit and they dumped this late bronze material in this area. However, what we are beginning to find is beginning to invalidate this position. Here's just a few shots of the restorable vessels, these late bronze restored vessels that were found in the favisa. This number 4 here, a late bronze 2A, large deep bowl with 2 handles, which those handles is a fairly rare find for a bowl like that. 7, 8, and 11 would be late bronze 1 goblets. You can see the everted rim there, sharp carination, prominent step there, sitting on carefully executed pedestals. Down here in the number 11, you can see some exterior concentric circles, which are consistent with late bronze pottery. So Finkelstein's assessment of the favisa was the pottery from the debris dump is typical of a general late bronze assemblage, with the majority of the assemblage being from the late bronze 1A period through the early part of late bronze 2A. So based on Finkelstein's assessment of his findings, he concluded that the site was inhabited all the way up to the beginning of the late bronze 2A period, and then deserted through the remainder of LB2A through LB2B, and then inhabited again in the Iron Age period. He came to this conclusion based on certain late bronze 2 pottery types that he thought were missing from this assemblage. Here's a couple of quotes directly from his excavation report. The local late bronze pottery testifies, therefore, to the termination of cult activity at the site at the early part of LB2A, or in the first half of the 14th century. To sum up, both the local and the imported pottery of stratum 6 indicate that for about a century and a half, from the end of the 16th century to the mid-14th century, the site was visited by pilgrims who left behind their offerings. Shiloh was deserted for the remainder of the late Bronze Age until the revival of activity at the site in Iron Age 1. So to give you guys kind of a visual of the timeline of kind of the juxtaposition of the two assessments, the top you can see Finkelstein's assessment starting in LB1A going to LB2B, and the blue box being the time frame that each position places the favisa. And you can see here Finkelstein starting around 1500 or so, going until the LB2A is where he said it stopped, and then the site was abandoned until the Iron Age. We are actually shifting it basically a generation. That Finkelstein was about a generation off, or about 100 years off in the assessment, and our findings are placing the favisa more in the LB2A, or the transition between LB1B, LB2A, and continuing all the way to the Iron Age. So we are assuming with this project an early date of the Exodus conquest, where Joshua and the Israelites enter Canaan approximately 1406 BC. And so Finkelstein's abandonment of Shiloh takes place at precisely the time that the text indicates that the Israelites would have been settling in the area. This bold claim has prompted a reinvestigation and a reanalysis of the late bronze pottery assemblage from Area D. So all of this reanalysis of all the pottery up to this point has been led by Dr. Scott Stripling in conjunction with world-renowned ceramic typologists with expertise in late bronze pottery, and several graduate students, including myself, who has been assisting with this analysis. So into our findings and the current project. So our micro-analysis that we have been working with on this project up to this point has been the previously excavated material from Shiloh. And I'm going to borrow a little bit of Scott's the presentation that he was going to give, which was an updates on Shiloh Season 4. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of our plans for Season 4, because our hope is that we can expand this micro-analysis into some fresh material that we excavated ourselves and continue our own analysis on this. But at this point in the analysis, Finkelstein's pottery plates from his final excavation report are the only source of data to which we've had access to. In our macro analysis, we have been using parallels from Seymour Guittin, Ruth Amiran's books, as well as pertinent regional digs, such as Bet Shean, to positively identify, up to this point, 43 of the original 192 late bronze forms. If you remember, roughly 2,600 pieces were excavated, 192 forms were published. 43 of those, we've come to a positive identification of those forms, and our assessment shows a fairly interesting breakdown of this assemblage. So Finkelstein maintained that most of the assemblage was from the LB1 horizon, and a small part of the assemblage was from the beginning of the LB2A. But in fact, from the 43 forms that were analyzed, we confidently identified only 13 of those forms from the Late Bronze 1 and 26 forms from the LB2 horizon. You can see a breakdown below of where those forms landed. The first concern here was that nothing within this assemblage that we have found thus far is uniquely Late Bronze 1A. All the LB forms, all the Late Bronze forms that were identified by Finkelstein also appear through the Late Bronze 1B, or that transitional phase between Late Bronze 2A. So, in other words, there is nothing identified that does not fit the 14th century. Essentially, Finkelstein is about a generation off here. As one can see, out of the forms that can be initially subdivided, there are twice as many forms that were found in the LB2 horizon as the LB1 horizon, which is what Finkelstein concluded was his statement. This is reinforced by the macro analysis that we'll discuss here shortly. So just a few distinctive forms that jumped out of his excavated material, and these were all found parallels and confirmed by Late Bronze pottery experts. First is a ring-based 2 bowl. It's not seen until the Late Bronze 2A, but it continues also into the Late Bronze 2B. A white slip 2 imported bowl, typically found in Late Bronze 2A, but again continues into Late Bronze 2B. Multiple Mycenaean 3A or possibly 3B sherds, which do not show up into the Shiloh or the general hill country region until about Late Bronze 2A, Late Bronze 2B. So this slide and the previous 2 slides essentially disprove Finkelstein's hypothesis. So assuming that our chronology is correct, the presence of these forms in the Favisa tend to disprove the hypothesis that the Favisa is the result of a Canaanite and not an Israelite sacrificial deposit. So in consultation with Dr. Robert Mullins, we've determined that the Shiloh Area D assemblage is identical with the Bet Shean level 11 strata R2, R1, which he dated to Late Bronze 1B, Late Bronze 2A. And here are just a few parallels that were pulled just in comparison. So we've got a nice conical bowl with inverted rims and a ring base. You can see here Area D and the Bet Shean area, just to give some comparisons, with a nice ring base you can see at the bottom. A bowl with interior concentric circles. There's a nice bowl with a footed raised base. Again, just nice comparisons between the 2 assemblages. So as we plan for our next few seasons at Shiloh, again, we plan to be here in Shiloh in January to continue some of the work, and my focus will be in this area, as I'll be supervising kind of the squares in this area. So we will be focused on excavation of new material in Area D through the removal of these remaining bulks. You can see here kind of the plan for taking these bulks down and identifying hopefully new material, as well as opening a few new squares in order to gather fresh first-hand material for analysis. The plan is to take down the north and the east side of each bulk, thoroughly sift. For those of you familiar with Shiloh, we've got a state-of-the-art wet sifting station which hopefully all the material will be dry sifted, wet sifted, and gather to extract as much data as we possibly can from there. In addition to the baulks, we plan to open a few new squares. You can see this is the original Area D. You can see the previously excavated squares here, with the green X's being the proposed squares of opening those. So whether we open a few, or 1, 2, or 3 this next season, the plan is to open that. So the red and the green circles here. The red is the favisa that Finkelstein identified. So that was the boundaries that he placed that debris 407 in. But interestingly, if you read his excavation report, he found late bronze material all the way down here in square N35. So our hope is to expand, push down a little further, and possibly expand the size of this favisa as we continue to identify or open up more squares. Here is just the overall field or areas of our next few seasons. You can see the area H1, which is where we've been working the past 3 seasons, and then down here in the right corner, a few new squares we plan to open in area D. So again, continual goals is to collect new material. Up to 3,000 bones have been found in Area D thus far, so we're not doubting that we're going to find more bones and hopefully gather carbon-14 dating, extract collagen for that so that we can get a better idea of the chronology or the dating of that area, as well as gather previously excavated pottery and bones which are currently stored at the Rockefeller Museum in Jerusalem. Again, up to this point, we've only had plates that have been drawn and photos of the pottery. So it would be nice to get our hands on some of the excavated material, take our own photos if we are able to, and then ultimately expand our macro or our macro analysis of the site in general by comparing the late bronze findings in Area D with projects like Gary Uri is working on, with the Danish excavations, as well as all of the ABR stuff that we have been uncovering today. Thank you very much.
Okay, excellent, Jordan. We've got plenty of time for questions.
Yes, sir.
Just curious, do you have any kind of relationship with Finkelstein?
None.
He doesn't ever look at your reports or anything?
We've tried to get him to come to the site a couple times. No, at least not up to this point. But I'd love for him to.
We have a celebration planned. This will be the 100th anniversary this year. 1922 is when the first excavations took place. So this summer will be the centennial celebration. So we're having a big media event. So we've invited him to come, but he hasn't responded.
Don.
You mentioned that you had 30, I think it's like 39 identified.
42, yep.
But your numbers only add up to 39. What happened to the other 4?
That's a good question. I'll have to get back to you on that. I'll have to do, maybe my math was off on some of the tabulations, but.
And another question, what about
Yes.
the Iron 1 collection or assemblage? Because you got the silos, which
Right.
is good. I love my silo there, so I know that. But in that area D, was there sufficient Iron 1?
So because my focus has been on the late bronze material, I have not, other than the silos, I have not dug into literally or figuratively the Iron Age assemblage that was pulled out of that area.
So I have to come back.
Yep. Yes, great.
I know that the ABR Shiloh excavation has gone down to bedrock. Did Finkelstein go down to bedrock as well, or did he stop short of that?
I think he stopped short.
So that may be the difference in
Yeah.
what we're seeing in dating.
It's possible. That's some of the things that we hope to. I mean, we're certainly with these new excavated squares plan to go down to bedrock. Absolutely. Absolutely. Chris?
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. Very interesting, and I think you make a great point, particularly with the imported pottery.
Yeah.
I would just say, don't make well, I would say, it is a question as to, okay, the front end, with the LV1 trying to tie it to an early deposit.
Right.
The question is, especially like the white slip.
Yeah.
You're talking about white slip too, and as even your projections show, the 13 shears going to late Bronze Age to
Right.
So it could be that this is over a long, it could
Sure.
be that it's in the 13th century as well. And then of course the question of interpretation.
Yeah.
Is this Israel or not? But I think you make a very good point that it basically can't be in the LV1 because of the imported pottery
Right.
that you see. But whether it's 14th or 13th
Correct.
century, that's the
Correct.
or 12th.
Sure.
Since we have plenty of time, I'll just jump in here, and then Clyde's got a question. So when Finkelstein published this is the only data that we had. So scholars as good as Bryant Wood, for example, when he wrote articles for the Zondervan Archaeological Study Bible, all he had was Finkelstein's interpretation. So what do you read in the Zondervan Archaeological Study Bible? This is evidence of a Canaanite sacrificial system at Shiloh. And so that's all that's out there. And so we're on the verge now of, putting a different interpretation and new data onto that, which indicates that it's actually evidence of an Israelite occupation. Clyde.
Oh, Clyde.
Just out of curiosity, you had a
Yes.
casemate wall there in your area D, I think, and the glacés.
Correct.
What do you date those at?
I mean, you might be able to answer this better than I with the glacis, but I
The
think
glossy's MB2.
Okay.
We've got embedded in the glossy, we've got MB2 pottery
Okay.
embedded in the glossy. So that appears to be the...
Well, that makes a difference.
Well, that's the construction of the glossy. So it's much older than the favisa. So the favisa is deposited on top of the glossy.
I mean, this is similar to what you have at Jericho. That's why I was really curious.
Yeah, it's identical as a matter of fact. We've got 2 meters of red mud brick that falls on top of the glossy and creates a ramp, just like Jericho.
Just like Jericho.
Chris, do you have another?
Yeah, I just had, is there any imported pottery from other parts of the excavations? You mentioned that you found LV shears from other parts. Is there? And I know it hasn't been
Analyze fully.
We do.
Yeah, so it's Cypriot stuff and Mycenaean.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Any other questions?
Is it too late to volunteer for the winter season?
Absolutely not. Jump in.
If you've been trained by Scott, you can tell.
Yes. So if you'd like to volunteer for our upcoming seasons, please, you can go to digshiloh.org.
Come see me.
Yep, talk to Henry Smith. He's our administrative director of Shiloh. He can get you signed up real fast. We'd love to have you there to help us.
Sign up today.
Yes.
There's a discount if you do it today.
Oh, wow.
Any other questions? Since we are ahead of schedule, our next session doesn't begin for 22 minutes. I was supposed to present on Shiloh Season 4, so stay here, Jordan.
Yes.
I need your help. But let me say a few words about how the Area D Favisa fits into the overall picture of what we've excavated and how we're projecting this. Yes, sir.
Can I clarify? Have you guys dug an area? I kind of missed that.
No.
So you're just re-examining what has already been done and published?
Correct.
But we're about to.
Right. Yes,
We're going to
sir.
remove the balks and get new ceramic and bone evidence. And
Yep.
there was no carbon dating done out of that area either. And so, we're hoping to get carbon material and collagen for the bones that we can do carbon dating on. So there's a lot that we can do now that, they couldn't do then. We have a monumental building from the Iron One, at least Iron One, that is east-west that appears to be the exact dimensions of the tabernacle. Now, we'll have an answer to that this winter, if indeed it is. But if it is what we think it is, when you exit that building going east, you walk for 30 or 40 seconds and you run into the favisa, the bone dome. So as if you are operating a sacrificial system, Mark Hassler is about to present on a demolished altar with altar horns from Shiloh from that monumental building, which is also where the ceramic pomegranates are from. If you walk directly from there, that's where the dump is. And so the picture seems to be that there's a sacrificial system that's operating. They're then carrying the remains outside the camp, dumping on top of and outside the wall. The storage rooms then on the northern perimeter appear to also function. So we're kind of inductively building, getting a picture of what it seems to have looked like in antiquity there. So that's just giving a little bit of context to the Area D. It's not in isolation, but it's part of a larger picture of a sacrificial system. The bones, you did not mention the right side of the animal, and the left side. You want to talk about that?
Sure. So the majority, again, I said there was 3,000 bones that were found, and after doing analysis in his final excavation report, the majority of those bones were actually identified as the right side of the animal. So if you go back into Leviticus and
7.
Yeah, Leviticus 7, you find the priest. That was the priest's portion of the sacrifice. So it's pretty incredible, some of the connections that are made in this favisa. Yeah.
Anybody else? Okay, we have 19 minutes. Well, there's more hands.
What does Finkelstein make of the fact that they're on the right side?
He doesn't mention it. Well, he doesn't mention the. He mentions the right side,
Yeah.
but he doesn't. Yeah, doesn't
Have a little
connect that
interpretation.
to the biblical text. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. He may not have been aware. I mean,
Yeah.
Obviously, he's a brilliant guy, and the Ugaritic literature and the Egyptian literature and so forth, but he may not. That Leviticus 7 may have slipped by him. I don't know. But it's a significant statistical anomaly is not possible when you're talking about better than 60% is from the right side.
I would just add as a comment to this that Jonathan Greer's work at Tel Dan is really relevant as a comparison because he's basically said the same thing about the Tel Dan assemblage, which spans the 10th and the 9th and 8th century. And I mean, obviously it's a related issue, but here you're talking about something even earlier, but which has a big impact upon the dating of the so-called priestly source. They're talking about the Iron Age, but it's definitely a point of comparison. It's a great title. It's called Dinner and Dan. So it's worth checking out as a way of comparing your data sets.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So Mark Hassler's going to talk in the next session about altar horns from Shiloh. Abigail Levitt's going to talk this afternoon about a new type of pottery you may not have even heard of called Ainun pottery that has a Bronze Age form and an Iron Age wear and how that fits into this discussion. I think you'll find that really interesting. And in a larger sort of a picture, we're working with Mount Ebal data as well. And it seems that our favisa plays out at about 1250 BC. So it's the early part of Iron Age 2B, but then it plays out for about 100 years, and then we pick back up with Iron 1 occupation. Interesting what you get in the Bible. You've got Joshua and the Israelites arrive, the tabernacle is there, then we've got Eli and Samuel and so forth. We really don't know anything about that in-between period. At Mount Ebal, we're analyzing all of that pottery and so forth, and I agree with Zertal's dating. You're essentially 1250 to 1150. This Mount Ebal altar is occupied, and Joshua 24 indicates that the tabernacle is up there. So it's not stationary at Shiloh. So what I'm saying is Ebal seems to be occupied at the very time that we have a gap in Shiloh. So it's occupied, moves, is reoccupied. So these are the things that we're investigating and we hope to know more about as the years go by. All right, I think we've got about 15 minutes. Okay, see you at 11.
Good job. Thank you.